Well, good morning, folks, and happy Friday to you all. It's good to see all of you online this morning. As you well know, my name is Bruce Cladney, and I'm the Executive Director for the Kansas Association of Counties, and it's great to welcome you all to another edition of the Governor's Recovery Office, the Spark CARES Act Funding Zoom webinar. We've got a lot of stuff in store for all of you this morning, and so hopefully we got a lot of good questions answered to date, and I think we've got a few more coming up, so hopefully we'll get good answers for those later on in the webinar this morning. A couple of things going on, a little housekeeping. As you all know, this is our last official organized Zoom, so be on the lookout for future Zoom messages and meetings coming out of our KAC office. And I know that Doug and Vijay and the rest of the recovery office staff have some great plans to do some regional work, and you're going to hear a lot more about that here this morning. Also, don't forget the listserv. People are still using that here and there and frequently. I appreciate seeing some of the questions that you ask about what folks are doing and how they're handling different situations. Like I said, if you have not gotten on the listserv, or if you're not receiving email messages via the listserv and you've already given your name and email address to me, please reach out and let me know. But for right now, if you're new to the webinars and your name is not on the listserv and you'd like to be, just send me an email at Cladney, CHLADNY, at kansascounties.org, and send to me your name, your email address, and the county that you're working in, and we'll get you signed up for that. So with that, I see that Doug is now on the line with us this morning, and so not to take up any more of everybody's precious, valuable Friday morning time, Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you and the rest of the Spark Office folks. Oh, we can't hear you. Nope, still cannot. There we go. Here, try now. No, that wasn't you that I heard. Okay, we'll get Doug back here in just a second.
Bruce, can you hear me?
Oh, we can hear you fine now, and see you fine. There we go.
I had to jump off again. I don't know.
Must
be operator error for sure.
Well, you're here now, so it's good to see you this morning.
Okay, good morning, everyone. As Bruce said, we have some exciting things to roll out for you today, and we're going to talk through a lot of what's been happening and what some of the next steps are. So, without further ado, I'm going to just go ahead and jump into the slideshow and see if I can. Bruce, I don't have the ability to share my screen yet, so. All right, so.
Okay, try that now.
I got it, it's on now, so.
Wait a minute, because we see you.
Yeah. Okay, should be ready to go. Can everybody see the first slide, and did we advance to the second, Bruce?
Yep, looks
All
good.
Right.
Yes, you're working.
Very good. So I figured it out better this week. Thanks for your patience last week. So in terms of an agenda today, a pretty typical agenda for us, at least from the last couple of weeks. We'll do some quick updates from our office. We'll talk through some county best practices. Number 3, I think, is the item that most of you really want to spend some time talking about. So we'll talk about county plan updates and where that stands. We'll talk about some next steps. And then, as always, we'll dive into whatever questions you might have. But before we get started, like Secretary Lorenz likes to do, I always want to start with this slide. 124 days until December 30th, counting today. So we're working hard. We're trying to work fast and get things out to you because we know that the clock is ticking for all of us. This is a slide that you saw last week, but just kind of a reminder, we do have a single FAQ document with all the questions on the website that should be updated recently. We provided over 400 emails, voicemails, and guidance interpretation responses. We continue to expect additional guidance on the ability to hold funds beyond 12/30 for a federal audit, and we have posted those federal audit requirement guidelines on covid.ks.gov on the website. This is a link that I think Bruce sent out to each of you to your listserv, but I thought I would post it here as well. And it's just some recently released information that shows how funds are being spent nationwide. It's an interesting report. As someone noted, it does have a bit of a lag in it, and that gives the appearance potentially that funds aren't being spent, when I think we all know that there are plans to put those funds to good use. But nonetheless, it's an interesting slide or interesting place that shows how things are taking place nationwide. So if you haven't seen that yet, haven't looked at it, you might hop on that and just take a look. County best practices. We talked about this certainly a little bit last week and in prior weeks, but we want to continue to emphasize that you share with your colleagues. Use the listserv, use this office, but there's just no need to reinvent the wheel. We know that's one of the great things about government, is that we can collaborate and borrow ideas from each other, because some things are working well and they'll work well for you. So we just want to make sure that you're talking and sharing those ideas that are working well, but also conversely, those ideas that haven't necessarily worked out the way you planned, that you tried and it just didn't quite hit the mark for you. So either of those things are really good to share. As noted on here, what's good for one may be good for all of us. We want here at the state, at the Office of Recovery, we want to be a resourceful partner to each of you and to be utilized with KAC as a conduit for sharing useful tools, information, and ideas across the state. So please, we're really looking for some good stories that we can put out there to show how these funds are being put to beneficial use. So we would love to be able to share some of the great things that you're doing, not only with your colleagues, but also just statewide. With grant programs, we're certainly recommending that you consider using community partners to help administer those grants. As we review the plans, we notice a lot of you are doing that, and I think that's a really good best practice, and we would recommend that you approach it in that manner. We highly discourage direct payments to businesses without a formal application process. We have seen some of those, and we would certainly highly encourage that there be some sort of application process for those funds that are going directly to businesses. And just another recommendation for the group, that you consider development of sort of a selection committee, review committee, to review those things so that we're all on the lookout for potential conflicts of interest. I know in the last week I've gotten a couple questions from counties about conflicts of interest, and I appreciate those questions. They're wise questions, because we all want to make sure that we avoid not only an actual conflict, but as we all know, sometimes the appearance of a conflict is just as bad as the actual conflict itself. So let's make sure we're being aware of that and working through those things. We talked about this last week as well. We strongly recommend the establishment of an MOA, a Memorandum of Agreement, to serve as a contractual vehicle for sharing funding with subrecipients. We know that subrecipients should agree that the use of funds is consistent with the statute and have not been otherwise reimbursed for that expenditure. We want to take special care to make sure folks aren't getting double reimbursed for things. As we talked about last week we were developing a MOA template. The template is developed. It's just going through the final review process, and we will be able to have that posted on our website and out to the counties early next week. It's not a requirement, but it's certainly a strong recommendation. And as always, we're reminding you to please work with whatever appropriate professionals are in your area to work for the type of expenditure being made and the entity to which you're providing funding. There's going to be some unique circumstances, and certainly engaging the appropriate professional is going to help you and us make sure that we stay compliant and have the best use of those funds. In terms of subrecipient monitoring, each of you, as sort of the boots on the ground in your area, have a better understanding of the capacity of your potential subrecipient. So just make sure that you do understand that and ensure that you meter your method of providing funds appropriately. Advance payment requires regular reconciliation of funds and introduces risk of noncompliance, only being discovered after the funds. So be cautious with advance payments. Reimbursements have less compliance risk, but it's probably more of an administrative burden for the county. And I think we all know that some subrecipients may have a limited capital and their ability to incur expenses without advance or a prompt payment are that they can be sometimes limited. So that's a decision that the county needs to weigh as to what's going to work best in their area. And same caveat as a couple of other slides, please work with the appropriate professionals to balance the pros and cons of each of those approaches and determine what works best for you. The last slide in terms of county best practices that we wanted to share. Each of your counties received a survey from this office, and special thanks to Kim Qualls at KAC for helping us put this together and do some of the analysis. These are the results that we shared with the Spark Committee on Wednesday. Since that time, a couple more counties have actually come in, but the breakdown has generally remained the same. But you can see the question we asked was, did your county utilize a local task force to assist in recommending how Karzak's funds would be allocated? And close to 90% of the counties did, and their 11% did not. Even with the additional counties that have come in, the ratio is still 89 to 11. So kudos to that. And then again, one of our questions was, who's helping to manage your Karzak funding program? Outside contractor, county staff with normal duties, county staff receiving extra compensation, or some combination of all of the above. And you can see the breakdown here on the slide that it's fairly evenly broken down between county staff doing their normal duties and using an outside contractor. This is also a slide that we shared Wednesday with the Spark Committee. So if any of you watched that committee meeting, you will have seen this before. And this just kind of gives you a preview of some of the things that have been analyzed and some of the ways that we're looking at the funding after a preliminary review of all 105 county reports. You can see that basically of the $400 million allocated to counties by the state, 45 million was already spent or would be reimbursements. Planned aid before December 30th should be was 317 million, and then there's a 38 million not reported, which probably a better way to say that is not allocated. The funds are planned to be spent. It's just unclear at this point what exactly those funds will be used on. And this map you can see is, we'll be talking about this in greater detail here in a second, but this is how we are breaking down the state for an analysis. You can see that the state we've divided into essentially 9 regions plus Sedgwick and Johnson County as their sort of own regional entities. And again, we'll talk more about this later, but the idea is for us to have more regionally focused conversations with the counties and talk about things in sort of a smaller group setting with the counties. So one of the things we provided Wednesday for the Spark Committee was this high-level analysis of what two potential regions look like as they compared to each other. This was Region 3 and Region 8, and you can see the counties listed there at the bottom of the slide, what Region 3 and what Region 8 are. But Region 3, we would generally, and I think you would generally call Southwest Kansas. Region 8, then we would generally call Northeast Kansas. And this was just a way for us to introduce some of what we're seeing in terms of trends, and just to show the folks at the state level what we were seeing and what some of the variances were. And I'm not going to really go through this slide in great detail, except to say that this does give us a good comparison of what the different regions look like, and it is fairly similar to what we're seeing across the state as a whole. So there's not very many inconsistencies with how this would look if you compared, say, Region 1 to Region 10 or 3 to 7 or something. It's remained fairly consistent. Real quickly though, you can see that between 14 and 17% of the planned funding went to schools, 2 to 4% went to higher education, 1 to 6 went to health systems, 4 to 6% went to what we defined as communities. And you can see the note at the bottom of the slide what community includes. Those are programs for at-risk population, such as household relief, food assistance programs, senior assistance, etc. A couple places where there were some variances is 3 to 13% for business and nonprofit, and then 11 to 21% for governmental institutions. As you dig deeper into the data, there's good explanations for those variances. For example, we had one county that gave over 50% of their funding to government institutions, but those government institutions had their own sort of community and business and nonprofit programs rolled into their funding. So that skews the business and nonprofit and community numbers a little bit and makes the government institutions ones look higher when it's really not. And I did explain that on Wednesday. Then the highest allocation we're seeing across the counties, here this 37 to 42%, is county direct aid expenditure. And in general, that consists of a couple different categories. We're seeing public health and public safety, personnel expenditures or expenditures, PPE, building modifications, cleaning contracts. Those are sort of the consistent things we're seeing in terms of county direct expenditures. Moving on to the next slide, this is actually a detailed breakdown that we shared with the SMART committee of what Region 3 looks like. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide, there's total population and total allocation that was received across the region. The evolution of key drivers, which included COVID cases by 1,000 population, and then the monthly unemployment. And then similar to the previous slide, a breakdown that shows where in each category the counties landed in terms of allocation percentages. And again, there's some notes on these slides that show where some of the anomalies are and where, what explains some of those anomalies. So this was shared with the group as well. And then the next slide was identical except for Region 8. Again, the evolution of the key drivers, monthly unemployment, and then where the expenditures by recipient, where those percentages broke down. So that takes us to next steps, and we can certainly answer more detailed questions about those slides if you have them, but this takes us to next steps, which I think everyone has an interest in at this point. And as we noted last time, we've received all of the direct aid plans and the reimbursement spreadsheets. We're evaluating submissions, and we have told you that we would provide feedback and authorization by September 15th. but we will be getting out, we anticipate that we'll be able to get out some initial feedback by next week. So we're excited about that. And there's a lot of folks to thank for that effort, but we're excited that we're going to be able to get that out to you so that we can begin providing you some feedback. We talked and we got some questions last week in the chat about future reporting and what the process for amending your reimbursement and direct aid forms, the new reimbursement forms and amending your direct aid form, what that would look like. What we are working to do is to streamline the reporting process. We're going to release more information about that next week, but we will have that out to you. And I think you're going to find that it's going to be a much more streamlined process, that the forms are going to be able to sort of talk to your direct aid form, and it should be a relatively easy process for the counties to work through once we get those rolled out to you. Just as a reminder, there's a Spark Joint Committee meeting next Wednesday, September 2nd at 10 a.m. The final thing I would note on this slide is that the Office of Recovery, the state of Kansas, has engaged an experienced management consulting firm to assist with the implementation of CRF. And that firm is a combined team of BCG, Boston Consulting Group, and Witt O'Brien's, and again, they're supporting the state of Kansas implementation of CRF. BCG has been providing strategic planning for COVID-19 and program design at all levels, and they're assisting in programmatic analysis and state level grant design to ensure critical investments are applied to the appropriate and most impacted areas. And similarly, Witt O'Brien's is providing support to state and local governments and advising on strategic and compliant use of nationally over $4.5 billion. They have some great experience. We've really enjoyed working with them so far, and they're going to be very helpful as we move forward in providing information to the counties and providing information to us so that we can all make sure we keep this process moving as quickly as we need to. So with our consultants, we are going to be rolling out and implementing a more hands-on level of support to the counties through a regional support model. As part of this support, a technical assistance specialist will be assigned to each region. County staff will work with this TA specialist on eligibility considerations, monitoring and compliance best practices, grant administration, implementation best practices, and reporting expectations, and then just general overall considerations. So counties will work on a regional basis with their technical assistance specialist, and this office will continue to be involved in that in each of those regions. And we think that's really going to allow you to focus your questions and comments to a smaller group and to be able to talk about things that are common to your region. Because part of what we're seeing is there are some commonalities across these regions that we've broken out. And we really think that putting together this regional approach is going to allow a more focused and more effective use of funds and distribution of funds, and we'll be able to get your questions out on a more expedited fashion. This is a larger version of the map that I showed before, and again, these are the regions and how we have broken them out. I'm sure everyone has gone to look first at their region where they're at. We tried to make them based across the trends we were seeing and based on folks that you have been typically used to working with, counties that are neighboring to you and those sorts of things. But this is how the regions will be broken out. So I talked about the spending plan reviews. We anticipate, again, getting those out next week to you so that you can have some good initial feedback. And the overall intent of those, it's going to take the form of a memo that we are going to distribute to the county contacts. So that will be the overall form of it. It'll be a multi-page memo that'll talk about sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly of the plans. But the overall intent is a review to identify potential compliance issues. And it's sort of broken down into this red, yellow, green. Green, proceed, yellow, proceed, but we have questions first, and red, which I think in talking to the consultant this morning, I think we've only seen one red across the state at this point. So kudos, we're really excited about that everyone really did a nice job putting those plans together and making sure they're compliant and going to beneficial use in their counties. So again, the overall intent of that review is to identify compliance issues. As we talked about last week, that review is beneficial for the county and the state because it identifies areas that could be problematic for both of us for compliance reasons. And as I just said, the potential outcomes of the review are that you're authorized to move forward with implementing the plan and paying reimbursements, although there may be occasions where additional information is needed. And that'll be spelled out in the memo. And then the county is authorized to move forward with implementing their plan on some of the plan, but additional consultation with the state and your regional TA is going to be required. So that is sort of the rolling review that we're doing, the rolling allocations or rolling approvals that we're doing, rolling authorizations. And we think that's going to be good for you and for us as we move forward on this. This slide is similar to what we talked about last week, that the authority to proceed does assume a county accountability, and ultimately you are still responsible as a county for ensuring compliant use of funds. As a reminder, a single audit requirement is any federal funds over $750,000, so that may be an issue for many counties and many entities. And like we've said in a couple previous slides, please make sure you work with the appropriate folks, attorneys, accountants, and consultants to take the right steps to reduce your liability and make sure we're doing good documentation. That's going to be crucial as we all move forward with this, is just making sure that we're documenting things correctly and creating a nice paper and electronic trail to answer the who, what, and why questions of why funding use happened. My final slide is just like last week. Want to continue to say thank you for the submissions. It really was some great work by all the counties. Again, as we look across the state at this point, we've only seen one sort of red category. And so I think that that alone is a good demonstration of how seriously the counties have taken this and how well they want to spend their funds on appropriate areas across their community. Thanks again for your continued participation and for our strong partnership. We want this to be continue to be a good partnership, and thanks for working to make Kansas better. In terms of the strong partnership, please, as always, advise myself or anybody in this office what we can do to help make this partnership even better for you. So that concludes the slideshow today. And now I will turn it over, or I will stop sharing my screen and start looking at the chat questions, see what we might have in terms of chat.
Doug, I can help moderate here if you want as
Okay,
well.
that's great, Vijay. I appreciate that.
So the first question is from Nelson. So it says, during the Joint and Steering Exec Committee, a couple of the committee members mentioned they were disappointed that counties weren't providing as much round one funding to businesses and nonprofits. Are you going to be potentially directing counties to change some of their funding to better address those concerns, or is that being thought about?
You said that was from Nelson?
Yes.
Yeah, Nelson, so that did come up, and from a couple of the committee members. One of the things that we did talk about with them a little bit is that although the business categories show, for example, I think it's 4 to 6% across the counties, that is a bit misleading because, and I'll just use the example of Leavenworth County. Leavenworth County gave, I think, 11 million of their 19 to local government units. But in those local government units, Leavenworth, Lansing, Tongi, they had their own version of direct aid to businesses. And so again, we think some of those numbers are skewed, and it's actually a higher percentage. In terms of whether we're going to redirect some of those funds, our direction, I guess, continues to be that you need to put these funds to the most beneficial use in your county, thinking through some of the strategic objectives of your county and the state, and just making sure that you're meeting the needs of your counties.
So the next question from Nelson I answered. It was relating to Governor Kelly's Zoom with teachers. We'll touch base with KSDE, and I think the governor has a call with superintendents coming up. And so we might just mention the recovery office process and how we're going to be providing approval before funds are going to be spent at the local level. So the next question is from Eric. Who should people email at the recovery office to receive notification of upcoming meetings of the START committee per COMA? I've had several non-government folks tell me they had no knowledge of the meeting past Wednesday. I mentioned that putting it on public square at the last moment doesn't provide real notice. Also, why aren't agendas posted for the public, and is there a reason slides aren't posted for the public to follow along during the meeting? I can start here. So we post on public square at least 24 hours, sometimes 48 hours before the meeting happens. Doug, I don't know if there's who they email to get on maybe the list, the communications list. But all of the agendas and items are posted on the website. As to if they're posted directly before, I think we try our best to post them directly before the meeting. Sometimes they're posted after the meeting, but the YouTube link allows you to follow along during the meeting, and they're always posted online. Doug, is there an email that folks should look to get more notification?
Vijay, at this point, I guess I would say I don't know what the email would be, so I'll just take responsibility for receiving those, and then I'll make sure that they get passed on to the right person. So just send me doug.gerber@ks.gov an email, and I'll make sure it gets passed on to the right person in creating that list.
Okay. Comment from Phil. So he said, I think he's expressing some frustration, but he's saying if you have the ability to break down the information at this level of detail, what is the delay in giving us the ability to expend at least the reimbursements? Phil, I can start here. The goal of the review process is to help you all. The consultants that we've brought in are scrupulously reviewing federal guidance and ensuring that you all are protected in the event of a federal audit, and that everything is compliant and that we're answering the right questions and having the right supporting paperwork to ensure that we're expending funds to the letter of the law. And so the analysis that was done was taken just of 2 regions to provide you all an example and to provide the SPART committee an example of the sorts of things that we're tracking. Like Doug mentioned, we're getting you responses early by getting to you to them next week and having that technical assistant to help you work through. And once you get those, anything that's green, you can go on. Anything that's yellow, we just need to answer some questions. And like Doug mentioned, there's only one across the state that's red, and red means that you can't spend. And so you'll be able to start moving forward. It's just making sure that we're helping you all to ensure that everything is allowable.
That's right on, Phil, or Vijay. And Phil, I understand your frustration, I suppose, having been in your shoes. I know what it's like, but bear in mind that for the most part, we received plans on August 17th, and we're going to have a pretty quick turnaround for you, certainly earlier than anticipated. And really, we want, it's in all of our best interest, including ours, to get those funds out to you and get you authorization to move ahead. So appreciate your patience, and we're going to get you the information.
Doug, there's a number of questions, and this will probably knock out about 4 or 5 of them around specifically the MOU. So I know that we had promised or talked about maybe providing some additional information as it relates to a more specific MOU. Do you have some information on when that's going to go out to counties if that's not already gone out?
It hasn't gone out. I was hopeful that we would be able to get it posted before today. It's developed, it's just being reviewed. There's a couple ongoing conversations about it, but I'm confident it's going to go out early next week. We'll be able to get it posted and ready for folks to use.
Okay. So, Sue, another comment relating to getting the approval again next week. Look for the approval on initial expenses. Kathy's question is one that we've seen a number of times. Could you give some more information on the reporting timeline? Is the September 15th reporting date going to change? How is the reporting going to look? Can you give some more information on that?
Sure, I'll start, and then Vijay, you can chime in if you have anything to add. As I noted in the webinar, actually the consultant is putting together a new reimbursement form for counties to use, and the idea is that that's going to tie directly to your direct aid plan and your previous reimbursement plans, so that those things will be sort of a seamless document for you, and that neither you nor us will have to reinvent the wheel as you move through this process. At this point, we're going to continue to have that September deadline, but again, we'll be able to have that form out to you next week.
And I'll just say, I mean, we understand that we're getting you approvals next week, and so you may not have very many expenses to report on that September deadline, and that's okay. You'll get the reporting spreadsheet around the exact same time that you'll get approval. And so if you can make expenses before then, I know it's a very quick turnaround, you can put those in there. Otherwise, we understand that you're not going to have very many, if at all, expenses for that first deadline. Again, those deadlines were set in the beginning, and we're going to continue to follow them because they were set by State Finance Council, but we understand that based on the timelines and getting approval that you may not have something specific to report for that. So the next question is related to the MOU. Again, we'll try to get that to you early next week. It's completed, I know, we're just waiting for some final approval. Heather's question is about conflict of interest if counties are also using Widow Bryan's or BCG.
Yeah, I can address that, Heather. There are some counties that were using Widow Bryan or BCG, and we actually yesterday reached out to each of those counties to talk through with them any potential conflict of interest and essentially the firewalls that we're constructing. And basically, the folks that work with those counties on the completion of their plans will not be involved in the review process of their plans. They will be separate and distinct folks, and that will allow a good separation there and allow that there not to be that conflict.
So thanks, Doug. One more thing I want to address as it relates to reporting is I know that you all are thinking about the clawback portion, or just the recoupment portion of if you don't have funds correctly allocated, those go back to the state. That only happens if there is an ineligible expenditure that you cannot reallocate for any reason. And so as Doug mentioned, there's only one that's in the red category of an ineligible expenditure that you're going to have to reallocate. The other ones, there's the yellow ones. I know there's a number of those you'll have to answer questions on. We're not going to, as the state, we're not going to recoup funds before you've had an opportunity to answer those questions and reallocate anything as you need. And so go ahead, Doug.
One, Vijay, that actually came up in the committee meeting on Wednesday. There were a couple of questions about that. And I gave what I think was a similar answer to what you just said. Additionally, I don't think that there's going to be any unspent funds or unallocated funds. So while we're thinking about how we might handle that, it's not high on the list of concerns because I just don't think it's going to be a reality.
And the only other thing that I'll add on that is that your technical assistance folks are going to help you walk through the process, and it's going to be a partnership as we get the information that we need to get to green on everything on these plans. And so it's not going to be as though it's going to be you get the plan one day, the next day everything that's in yellow or whatever is expected to be answered. And so we're going to work with you on that and want to ensure that that's going to be a partnership. I think there was some comments in the chat about the MOA template or the resolution template that was already posted. So what's already provided to you all is an example resolution template for you to sign. The MOU is a more specific, obviously legal document, and that we were recommending that you all work through with your subrecipients. And so we'll get that to you next week. But I know that some of you are using a version of the resolution to develop your MOAs. I'm sure that's okay as well, because those are both going to be very similar documents. And so if you're doing that, absolutely go ahead. The reason we're going to provide you a sample MOU is to maybe save you some time in adjusting it. And so that's the reasoning behind that. Question from Leslie. I think your question was answered kind of on the previous discussion about reporting. We're going to work with you. We know that your September reporting may not have very many expenses at all, and that when we give you your direct aid forms, you'll have time to answer those questions, and we'll work with you and give you notification along the way. And that's the goal of the technical assistance folks. A question from Bill. Doug, can you explain the red category can you explain what the categories are again so just everybody is clear?
Sure. And sorry if it wasn't clear in the webinar. I'll try to make it more clear here, but fundamentally it will be crystal clear in the memos that you get. So that'll be spelled out really well for you in those memos. But essentially the green is, think about it like a stoplight, right? Green is go. Yellow is proceed, but we have some questions, and so we need to get those things answered. And then the red is, boy, we just don't think this is going to be compliant. And again, don't be too focused on the red because that's going to be the exception, not the rule. We're finding most things are falling into the green or yellow category. And so we think once you get the memos, you're going to be able to proceed on some of your stuff, and others, there'll be some questions about that we think will be relatively painless to answer, and then you'll be able to proceed on those as well.
Question from Lori is, early on we were told that if the state approved our plan, the state would be responsible for the funds that the federal government deemed it not an allowable expense. Why has this changed? I can't speak to early on conversations, but I would say that in the resolution that all the counties passed to receive the funds, it is, I think, pretty clear that the responsibility belongs with the county. But that being said, we are trying to be partners and help guide you through this and help give you good information with all the, the over 400 emails, the guidance interpretations, all those things. We're trying to put out good information so that you can be compliant. And certainly that's been the focus of the review of your plans, is to make sure that there's good compliance. So we're trying to protect both you and us, but ultimately it will be the responsibility of the county to make sure that compliance is achieved. And I'll add here that during the audit process, it'll obviously all of the documentation or the responses that we provided to you will be a part of that record. And so the goal of us doing a review is to provide you good information on our interpretations of what is an allowable expense and get us all closer to exactly what is in the letter of the law. And so we see that as kind of a partnership where we're giving you the best guidance possible to make these expenses because we've transferred them. we're giving you the best kind of technical assistance as possible. But in terms of how those funds are expended and ultimately where the responsibility lies is at the county level. Just like at the state level, we're responsible for any of the funds that we have directly expended, and that was the goal of the resolution. But I think we're going to continue to provide you the best information that we have from our legal folks or from our consultants about what we think is the most eligible, or where we see extra ways that you can paper your files to ensure that you have the correct documentation to support yourself in the event of a federal audit. And so, again, I see this as a partnership, and the goal of bringing on Witt O'Brien and Boston Consulting Group in large part is to give you some expert help in reviewing these plans and making sure that things are eligible. The next question is a federal audit required if 750K is expensed or allocated? From my understanding, Desiree, it is if we have transferred the more than $750,000 to you, you are subject to a federal audit. Doug, is that your understanding?
Yes,
as well?
That's my understanding as well.
So if you have been transferred from our account to your account over $750,000, you are subject to a federal audit.
But again, I can't overemphasize this. Talk with appropriate people in your county to make sure that you have compliance with that for specific programs.
Leslie, appreciate your point again about the clawback, but I would refer you back to kind of the earlier conversation. I know that you all are waiting, and this is a huge portion of your work is to make sure that you all have everything in line, and you have lots of subrecipients that need some information from you all. As we mentioned earlier, we're going to work with you on that. On the report, as well as the direct aid plan support and getting the information that we need. And you'll be able to go on all the expenses that you already have. And I know that your September 15th deadline is going to be maybe a little bit of a smaller sheet in terms of how much you've expended, but we're not going to recoup funds, and we don't expect to recoup any funds right now, in terms of, we know that a lot of the funds are either green or yellow, so we just need some additional information. Pam's question, Doug, is Pam's question, Doug, is it going to be Monday or Friday in terms of next week?
How about if I compromise and say Wednesday, Pam? I'm not trying to be facetious. I understand that you guys are anxious to get these, and I'll just keep saying this. We really want to get them out to you. That's good for you and for us. So I would say you should expect them next week, hopefully by the middle of the week.
The next question is, would it be possible to notify the county that has a red stop on a certain project today so that they can have more time to be looking for new projects and amend their plan? Doug, I'll let you answer that one.
Oh, good question. I don't know who asked that.
That was Lori and Renee.
And do we know where they're from?
I don't. But I think they were just asking, is it possible for that red county to know which signatures are red? So
we can reach out to that red county, so you can assume that if you haven't heard from us, then don't worry about it.
Okay.
Really, and I can't de-emphasize or emphasize that enough. Out of the 105 counties, there's one of everything that's been submitted so far. So
they're from Trigo County, Doug.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's right.
Okay. Okay. So, we'll follow up. So we've got a member of our consulting team, Matt, who just reached out and said he can give some more information on reporting. Matt, if you want to unmute yourself, you can definitely give some more information.
Thanks, Vijay and Doug. So I did want to touch on the outcome of the memos, or what we're actually going to be supplying to all the counties, and steps that you could be taking now to get ahead of these memos So we understand the pressure to go ahead and get a green on these and getting a go ahead on moving forward with your spending plans. So just a consideration about that. There are steps you can be taking now if you're going to be sharing money with the cities and schools and taxing authorities. Obviously, we're going to push out that MOA to be used as the template, but you can also think about what your mechanism is going to be to review expenses. We had touched on whether you want to do an advance pay to those entities versus a reimbursement. Those are internal conversations you can have to start to orchestrate the plan of how you're going to be reviewing expenses and reconciling use of funds by those entities. And this also goes to the compliance requirement is that the use of the technical assistance is to make the state more accessible to the counties to help resolve some of the eligibility questions you have. But ultimately, the state's not in a position to do a line item review of every single expense. And so when you share monies with cities and schools and taxing authorities, they are a subrecipient of the county. It is the county's responsibility to ensure that they're using funds appropriately. So creating risk assessment, matrices of understanding what are some of the compliance concerns around that entity, helping them with technical assistance where you can. And I think that in conversations with the state, we really want to try to push more materials out to the counties to use as templates as part of this regional support model. So the steps that you can be taking over the next week while you wait for your spending plan memo is starting to orchestrate what that reimbursement or advance pay process looks like, what sort of documentation you're going to require from those entities. That could include drafting up the MOA. And I think we are trying to get something out by Monday or Tuesday for that MOA without speaking for Doug, right? So
that's correct, yeah.
I think we're going to get that out to you pretty soon so you can get that put into place. But certainly at the early part of next week, those conversations your Spark team can start to do is to really look at how are you going to be providing funding to these entities? What is your mechanism for ensuring that they're going to use the funds appropriately? And at what interval are they going to have to reconcile funds or process reimbursement requests? So there's a fair amount of infrastructure that you need to be building on your end to be able to appropriately process all of those payments. Outside of that, I don't think that the state and our team has had any, pushback on community programs or grant programs. We put the considerations in there about the use of funds and going through an application process so that your team can also get ahead of that process. Start to think about how you want to stand up those programs, what sort of administrative burden that's going to require, and then really start to build the infrastructure around that. So those are some steps that your team can be taking now. To echo Doug's point, I don't think that we really had come across a lot of compliance issues. There's just understanding what the nexus is to COVID-19 on some of the more complex projects that were being proposed. But outside of that, the general use of funds seems appropriate in everybody's plan. So I don't think that anybody should slow roll what they're doing. I think it's just getting ahead and making sure that you're ready to roll as soon as you do get the green light. And then on the reporting requirements, we've also been having some very detailed conversations about how to streamline the reoccurring reporting process. And that's what we intend to also release next week is taking what you've already provided, consolidating it into a more streamlined reporting format, and then having that actually be part of the reporting interval. And we'll have more information on that next week. But I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Matt. That's great.
So thank you, Matt. I appreciate that. So I apologize. I think I've been saying September 15th because that's the date that we're going to get responses back. But I think the date that's in your for the next reporting date, the date that's in your county reimbursement report sheet for county reporting deadlines is September 10th. And so that is the date that's in the reporting spreadsheet. I mean, we'll have a conversation if that needs to give you all some additional time to move that back to the 15th. But as of right now, it's September 10th, and I know they are going to probably be very small reports. And so we just want to get things in. And so if you have immediate expenditures that you're going to make after you receive some approval next week. And we'll communicate if anything changes on that front, but go with the date that's in the spreadsheet currently. That's my fault for confusing folks. So Doug, are the results of the survey going to be sent out to everybody? I know that was a question last week as well.
Yeah, we can sure do that. I hadn't thought about that, but I'd be glad to send those out.
Okay, so we'll send those out maybe through Bruce or through the listserv or what have you, or to the primary contacts.
Yeah.
So we'll do that. Andrea, I appreciate that. I think there may be some discrepancies as it relates to the initial toolkit. I would go with what's in the reporting spreadsheet because that's the most up-to-date document. But if there's any changes in terms of that date for reporting, we'll let you know. Heather, we'll try to get the templates and things posted as quickly as possible. We know that once you get approval, you need to have those templates. And so we're going to make sure that before or during the time that you get those approvals, that those templates and things are out to you as well. I think there's a question. There's a question about the county that's in red. Doug, can you just clear that up in terms of what the next steps are for that one expenditure that you were referencing?
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question, but
I think one of the question was, can you call the county that?
Yes, again, we will, and you can assume as a county, if you don't hear from us, that it's not you.
Okay.
It's a good assumption anyways. There's a 1% chance it's you, so.
So which reporting spreadsheet are you just referring to? I was referring to the original county reimbursement report that you guys submitted had a county reporting timeline in it. And so that was the most up-to-date timeline that we have so far. So if you remember your original county reimbursement report that you've already submitted to us, the first tab had a county reporting timeline in it. And so follow that as much as possible. Leslie, I appreciate that comment. I know that there were some issues with the bugs as it related to the original spreadsheets and making all the formulas work. And so we will make sure to do some testing on that to make sure that there's no bugs moving forward on those spreadsheets. I know that was an issue in getting things out to your subrecipients, but I appreciate that comment. And then Doug, you posted your email. I don't see any other questions as it relates to today's webinar. Bonnie, I appreciate that comment as well. I know that there were some issues with hiding columns. The reason that happened is because we want to make sure that the formulas have their own column and that there's no way to mess with those formulas, which would then mess with the rest of the spreadsheet. And so we'll try to make those a little bit easier to interact with. But I appreciate you letting us know that feedback. I don't see any other questions. Doug, any parting comments?
No, just that we continue to work hard to make sure this partnership works and moves forward, and be looking for information from us next week, information that'll be good for you and good for us to get these funds rolling.
All right. Hey, guys, before we leave, real quick question is, as you do these regional technical assistance positions, what's the timeline? What's that going to look like? Are the TAs going to reach out to the counties in their region and introduce themselves and plan that? Or what can the members expect in the next, let's say, 5 to 7 to 10 days? What's that going to look like?
Bruce, I will reach out to those regions and help introduce the TA to those folks, and then as a region we can begin setting a process for how that interaction might look.
Okay, and so you'll be reaching out to those primary contacts that you have a list in your database.
Yes,
there that you've
I
been working
will. Yes.
Okay, so those of you that are on the Zoom right now, if you are the main contact for your county, then you can expect to be reached out to by Doug and a TA in the next 7, 10, 14 business days?
That's correct, Bruce. Yeah.
Okay.
And so a point of emphasis here is make sure that the primary and secondary contacts continue to be accurate for your county. Over the last week or two, we've run into a couple situations where we've sent an email or contacted who was listed as the primary and it wasn't necessarily the primary. So just make sure that is up to date. Thanks.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you again so much for your time and your energy. Folks, this I think concludes today's Zoom webinar. Like I said, this was the last official one we had on the books, so be on the lookout, because once we do schedule some in the future, we don't want to lose contact with you all. I know the organization, KAC, has greatly appreciated the partnership between the Spark Recovery Office and our organization, and you all are members that are working so diligently on these plans. So we want to continue to have that communication. Hopefully I'll be able to sit in on some of those regional meetings just so I can stay in contact with you all and find out all the great work that you're doing. Otherwise, don't forget to stay active on the listserv. We'll be using that information or that means to pump out information if necessary and to share thoughts, ideas, success stories, things like that. So with that, folks, it's been a pleasure working with you all today, and have a great rest of the week and a great weekend, and take care to you all.
Thanks.